So, uh, imagine, if you will, a really chaotic scene.
Okay, paint a picture for me.
You have this group of people standing in a super tight circle, and they're all armed, they're all angry, and they're all pointing their weapons directly at each other.
Seems pretty tense.
It is. But here is the twist. While they're staring down the barrel at their neighbors, they are also trying to, like, blindly fire at a target way outside the circle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is messy, it is dangerous, and according to the material we are taking a deep dive into today, it's actually the perfect metaphor for what is happening right now in Silicon Valley.
It is a really vivid image, isn't it? The circular firing squad.
It really is. And for you listening at home, we aren't just talking about a little corporate bickering here or,
No.
some snarky tech tweets.
Right.
We are jumping into a source titled The Hypocrisy of the Silicon Valley Circular Firing Squad. And let me tell you, this document comes out swinging.
It absolutely does.
It's looking at the current AI landscape, where the absolute heavy hitters, we're talking Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, are launching these aggressive attacks against Chinese open source AI models.
And usually, when we hear about U.S. tech companies going after foreign competitors, the narrative is pretty standard.
National security.
Exactly. It's about national security or protecting American intellectual property. But this source takes a completely different angle. It argues that these attacks are not only hypocritical, but potentially self-destructive.
Self-destructive. That is the key phrase there, because the source frames this as a situation where the big U.S. labs are throwing stones from very, very fragile glass houses.
Highly fragile.
So our mission today is to unpack all of this. We are going to look at the geopolitical risks, the massive legal battles, and this looming war between open source and closed source systems.
And just to kind of set the stage for you, the core tension here is really about control.
Who hoards the keys?
Precisely. Who controls the future of AI? Is it a few massive corporations in Silicon Valley guarding their proprietary secrets? Or is it a decentralized global open source community?
Right.
The source suggests that the aggressive behavior we are seeing from the big three, Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google, is actually a panic reaction.
A panic reaction. Now that is super interesting to me, because from the outside, they look like the undisputed kings of the hill.
They project a lot of confidence.
They do. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of the source. It starts with a very specific accusation. The U.S. labs are attacking Chinese models for something called distillation.
Yes, distillation.
Now, I have heard this term thrown around in technical circles quite a bit, but let's break it down so everyone is on the same page. What exactly is distillation in this context, and why is it being treated like a crime?
So, to understand distillation, we really have to look at how these models learn. Simply put, and I'm drawing directly from the source here, distillation is a method of retrieving information that has been authored by another system. Think of it like a student studying a really smart teacher's notes to learn a subject faster.
Okay, so you have the teacher model, which is the big, expensive, multi-billion-dollar one.
Right.
And the student model is the smaller, cheaper one that's trying to catch up.
Exactly. In technical terms, you take a massive model, say GPT-4, and you feed it prompts. It gives you answers, but it also gives you probability distributions, basically showing its work and how confident it is in its choices. The smaller model, the student, learns to mimic those exact outputs.
So it's a shortcut.
It is. It's a way to transfer intelligence from a giant resource-heavy model into a sleek, efficient one without having to spend $100 million on a massive server farm to train it from scratch.
So it's basically learning from the master. It's just pure efficiency.
It is efficiency. But here is where the conflict arises. The U.S. labs are accusing Chinese open source developers, and actually other open source projects too, of using their models to distill knowledge.
And they are calling it theft.
Yes. They are saying, you are building your product off our hard work, you're drafting off our slipstream, and that's illegal.
But our source totally calls this attack mistaken and, more importantly, massively hypocritical. Why?
This is where we get into the whole definition of fairness. The source makes a really sharp comparison here. It asks us to just look at how Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google built their empires in the first place.
Ah, I think I see where this is going. We're talking about data provenance.
Yeah.
Where they got their training data.
We absolutely are. They didn't handwrite all that training data themselves, did they?
Definitely not.
To build models like GPT-4 or Claude or Gemini, these companies scraped the entire internet. They took articles, books, code repositories, social media posts.
Everything.
Everything. Material they did not author and, crucially, did not have explicit permission to use.
Right. I mean, We have all seen the headlines over the last year. Artists finding their exact visual style mimicked, authors discovering their protected plots are somehow inside the machine.
Precisely. And the legal defense these companies use, the shield they constantly hide behind, is the fair use doctrine.
Okay.
They argue that scraping the web to train a model is fair use because they are technically transforming the data into something new.
Right, the transformation argument.
So the source's counter-argument is this. If scraping the internet without permission is fair use in principle and spirit, then distillation, which is literally just another method of extracting and transforming information, well, that must be fair use too.
So, if I'm hearing this right, the author is calling out a massive double standard here.
What glaring one.
The U.S. giants are essentially saying, hey, it's totally okay for us to take everyone's data to build our models, but it's absolutely not okay for you to take our models' outputs to build yours.
That is the exact core of the hypocrisy argument. The source explicitly says that distillation is simply a method of retrieving information. If you accept scraping, you have to accept distillation. You really can't have it both ways.
It's like a chef stealing secret recipes from every single restaurant in town to build his grand menu.
That's a good way to put it.
And then he turns around and sues a customer for tasting his soup and guessing the ingredients.
That is a remarkably accurate analogy,
Yeah.
and the source argues that by penalizing competitors for doing essentially what they did to get rich, these companies are trying to pull up the ladder behind them.
They want to close the door.
Yes, they want to be the last ones allowed to learn from others.
Wow. But the source doesn't just stop at the philosophical, is it fair debate, right? It brings actual receipts.
Serious legal receipts.
Yeah, this is what the document calls the hypocrisy ledger.
Yes, the hypocrisy ledger. The author moves from the abstract moral argument to the concrete evidence of these glass houses. And honestly, the list of litigation is staggering.
It really is.
It paints a picture of companies that are absolutely besieged by legal challenges regarding their own data practices.
Let's run through them for the listeners because some of these numbers really blew my mind. Let's start with Anthropic.
Okay.
Because they are often painted as the safe or, ethical AI company,
know.
right? That's their whole brand identity.
That is exactly their branding. They position themselves as the highly responsible alternative to the others.
But the source points out a major issue there.
It does. The source notes that Anthropic recently reached a landmark settlement. We are talking about $1.5 billion.
$1.5 billion. That is not a slap on the wrist. That is a massive payout.
No, it is a highly significant sum, and this was to resolve a class action lawsuit filed by authors.
Authors who are upset about scraping.
Worse than just web scraping.
Yeah.
The specific allegation was that Anthropic used millions of pirated books to train its Claude AI models.
Pirated books. So we are not just talking about scraping public blog posts here, but using hidden libraries of copyrighted material like that famous Books 3 dataset I've read about that were obtained completely illegally.
That is the claim the settlement addressed, and it fundamentally undermines the idea that their data provenance is squeaky clean.
Yeah, you don't pay out $1 billion if everything's perfectly fine.
Right. If you are paying over $1 billion to settle a claim about pirated data, it's really hard to stand on a soapbox and lecture Chinese open source developers about data theft.
Exactly.
And of course, they aren't alone. The source immediately pivots over to OpenAI.
Right. The creators of ChatGPT, the poster child for the AI boom, and they're currently in the legal ring with an absolute heavyweight, the New York Times.
Correct. The Times claims OpenAI illegally scraped their copyrighted articles and books to develop ChatGPT.
And that's just one of their lawsuits, right?
Yeah. It is just one of multiple high-profile suits they are currently defending. But the Times case is fascinating because the argument is that OpenAI built a commercial product on the back of high-quality, expensive journalism that they simply didn't pay for.
Which is a strong argument.
And the Times has actually shown examples in their filings where the ChatGPT model can recite paywalled articles almost verbatim.
Oh, man, which totally destroys the whole, the model just learned the general concepts defense. If it's quoting it word for word, it memorized it.
Precisely. And then, of course, there is Google. We can't leave them out of a major tech lawsuit party.
No, definitely not. What's the ledger say about them?
The source notes that Google is facing massive consolidated class action suits. The allegation is the theft of data from across the entire public internet.
Just scraping everything.
Right. The plaintiffs argue this violates the privacy and property rights of millions of users. Essentially, anyone who has ever posted anything online is caught up in this.
So when you step back and look at all three together, Anthropic, OpenAI, Google the picture. The source paints is incredibly damning.
It creates an undeniable pattern.
Yeah.
The synthesis here is that these companies are acting as aggressive defenders of their own intellectual property, attacking Chinese distillation methods, while simultaneously facing massive, credible accusations of violating the intellectual property of, well, everyone else in the world.
It really reinforces that circular firing squad metaphor we talked about at the top of the show.
It perfectly illustrates it.
Everyone is shooting, but absolutely no one has clean hands. But speaking of the firing squad, the source says the term isn't just about attacking China or defending against angry authors. It's also about how these companies treat each other.
This is such a fascinating layer of the corporate warfare aspect. The source argues that while they love to present a united front against open source or foreign threats privately, they are tearing each other apart.
How so? I mean, is it just normal competition for market share? Better products?
No, it's much deeper than that. It's aggressive talent poaching. But not just your normal Silicon Valley recruiting. The source describes a targeted strategy where they purge talent from one another with truly outrageous compensation packages.
I mean, we constantly hear about the million-dollar salaries for AI engineers.
We do.
But the source suggests there's a much darker motive here than just getting smart people in the building, right?
Right. The claim here is that they are actively hiring key people specifically to bypass R&D.
Bypass research and development.
Think about it from a business perspective. If you really want to know how your biggest competitor built their latest groundbreaking model, you could spend 2 years and millions of dollars trying to reverse engineer it.
Which is slow.
Or you can just hire their lead engineer, double their salary, and have them walk you through it on a whiteboard on day one.
So you aren't just buying the employee, you're buying the corporate secrets stored inside their brain.
Exactly. And doing that almost inherently involves skirting the edges of non-disclosure agreements and serious trade secret laws.
Yeah, that seems obvious.
Essentially, if you hire the person who built the competitor's model and they bring that proprietary knowledge with them, you have illegally acquired NDA-protected intellectual property.
That sounds incredibly legally risky for everyone involved.
It is phenomenally risky. The source even cites a specific high-profile example: the ongoing lawsuit between xAI, which is Elon Musk's company, and OpenAI.
Oh, right. That's been in the news a lot.
The suit claims that the hiring of these top researchers is actually a coordinated, deliberate campaign to illicitly siphon proprietary source code and training pipelines.
So it's basically corporate espionage disguised as standard tech recruitment.
That is the explicit allegation, and the source includes this really chilling quote about the negotiation tactics used with these new hires.
That's the quote.
It claims there is an unspoken rule in the Valley, or sometimes even a spoken one in these meetings, where the executives say, "We won't say anything if you don't."
We won't say anything if you don't. I mean, that sounds like something straight out of a mob movie, not a sunny tech campus in California.
It definitely implies a sort of mutually assured destruction, or at least a temporary, fragile truce regarding the secrets they are all actively stealing from each other.
Right, because everyone is doing it.
They all absolutely know the game they are playing. It suggests this cartel-like behavior where everyone is dirty so no one can actually call the police.
Okay, so let's pause for a second and just look at the board here.
It's a messy board.
It really is. They are fighting the copyright holders, the authors, the artists, the newspapers. They are fighting each other for talent and secrets in this shady underground war. And they are fighting Chinese open source developers. It honestly just sounds exhausting.
It is exhausting, but the source argues that all this infighting is actually a massive distraction from a much, much bigger problem.
Okay.
The author brings up a severe geopolitical risk that makes all this corporate drama look incredibly small by comparison.
Yeah, this is the part of the deep dive where the stakes get very real, very fast.
They do.
The source explains that Anthropic and some of the others reportedly want the U.S. government to intervene directly. They want a total ban on Chinese and open source models operating in the U.S.
Effectively, yes. They want the government to step in and outlaw the competition.
They are framing it as a national safety issue, I assume.
Of course, but the source argues it's pure protectionism. However, the author argues this is a dangerously impotent attack because they aren't thinking about how China might retaliate.
Right, and we aren't talking about China just banning iPhones or something standard like that. The source points to something much more critical to the entire tech infrastructure: rare earth minerals.
Exactly. This is the bottleneck. China holds a near monopoly on the global supply and processing of rare earth minerals, specifically elements like gallium and germanium.
And what are those used for?
These aren't just shiny rocks. These are the fundamental raw materials required to build high-performance chips, the servers, the heavy hardware that all of this AI actually runs on.
So the logic here is, if the U.S. bans Chinese AI models from the software market, China just cuts off the physical minerals we need to build the computers that run our AI models.
It's a rapid domino effect. If you can't get the minerals, you can't make the GPUs.
Right.
If you can't make the GPUs, the massive data centers stop growing, the entire industry freezes, and the source includes literally the most ironic piece of evidence I have seen in a long time to back this theory up.
Oh, I know exactly what you're referring to. The Gemini quote.
Yes.
This was my absolute favorite part of the reading. It's almost poetic.
It is quite something. The author apparently decided to ask Google's own AI, Gemini 3.1 Pro, about the likelihood of this exact geopolitical scenario playing out.
So they asked the Google machine, hey, what happens if the U.S. bans Chinese models? And what did Gemini say?
I will quote the AI directly from the source. China is 90% likely to weaponize its rare earth monopoly in a direct retaliation to any U.S. ban on Chinese AI models.
90%. That is not a vague, maybe it could happen warning. That is a near certainty, coming directly from Google's own advanced system.
And Gemini's conclusion was even more stark than just a percentage.
What else did it say?
It said, without access to China's rare earth minerals, the U.S. AI industry comes to a grinding halt.
To a grinding halt. That is just, the irony is palpable. The U.S. companies are actively lobbying for a ban that their own cutting-edge technology predicts will completely destroy them.
It perfectly highlights the futility of the attack. If you push for protectionism, you risk triggering a supply chain collapse that wipes you out anyway.
Yeah.
It's like locking the front door to keep the competition out, only to realize you've also locked yourself inside a building that's currently on fire.
It really makes you wonder if anyone in the boardroom is asking these long-term questions, or if they are just so hyper-focused on the immediate competition that they aren't seeing the cliff edge right in front of them.
The source heavily implies it's the latter. It calls the attack impotent for this very reason. It leads directly to mutual destruction.
And the document goes even further, right? Saying that this whole aggressive strategy isn't just risky for some hypothetical future, it's already backfiring right now.
Yes. The argument is that by making such a massive, loud noise about theft and copying regarding the Chinese models, the U.S. giants are just shining a massive spotlight on their own practices.
Right. Because right now, most regular people probably don't know about the deep technical nuances of scraping versus distillation. It's very inside baseball.
Exactly. The source notes that currently, the indiscretions of labs like Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google are largely under the public radar for the average person.
But that is changing rapidly.
Very rapidly. The source mentions the growing anti-AI movement. We know there's a ton of anxiety out there about jobs and automation. As millions of Americans potentially lose their jobs or fear losing their jobs to automation, the public anger is going to rise. And the source makes a very pragmatic point here.
Which is,
If you are an angry American worker whose job was just automated, who are you going to get mad at? A Chinese open source firm you've literally never heard of.
no, absolutely not. You're going to get mad at the big American company putting the chatbot on your boss's computer.
Yeah.
You're going to target Google, OpenAI, Anthropic.
Precisely. By aggressively attacking Chinese open source on ethical grounds, the U.S. giants are practically inviting the general public to examine their own ethics.
It's totally counterproductive.
They are drawing attention to themselves in a way that makes them the primary target. People will say, oh, you're upset about them copying your model. Well, didn't you copy the entire internet to take my job in the first place?
That's a huge narrative shift.
Yeah.
And the source mentions that this is already happening on social media right now. YouTube, X, the big influencers, are having a field day with this exact hypocrisy.
They're using the exact evidence we just discussed, the hypocrisy of the multi-billion-dollar lawsuits versus the attacks on distillation to openly mark these companies. The narrative is already slipping away from them.
So after all of this, we have to ask the big question, why?
Right, what's the motive?
Why are these incredibly massive, powerful, wealthy companies engaging in this completely chaotic, circular firing squad behavior if it's so risky and counterproductive? What is actually driving it?
The source offers a historical parallel that I think is really illuminating here. It points to the history of the internet itself.
Specifically, the old operating systems war.
Yes, the source states it very simply, Linux won the internet.
Right. And for those listening who might not be deep into tech history, Linux is the open source operating system that basically powers the entire back end of the modern web. It completely beat the proprietary closed systems in the server world.
It absolutely did. Companies like Microsoft fought it for
I remember
years.
that.
They called it a cancer. They tried to squash it legally and commercially. But eventually, the sheer collaborative power of the entire world working together on open source code simply beat the closed proprietary teams.
You couldn't outpace the crowd.
Exactly. The source argues that the current US AI giants know that history intimately. They see the writing on the wall. They know deep down that open source is poised to win AI.
So all of this posturing isn't a position of strength at all. It's a position of pure fear.
That is the source's ultimate conclusion. They have essentially lost their minds and formed this circular firing squad because they are terrified.
Wow.
They are desperately trying to legislate and litigate their way out of losing a technological war against a decentralized open source movement that is simply moving faster than they ever could.
It really reframes the whole situation, doesn't it? You look at these slick press releases and these massive lawsuits, and you usually think, wow, these guys are absolute titans clashing for world dominance.
But this source says something different.
Yeah, it says, no, these are executives panicking because they know their competitive mode is drying up by the minute.
And the quote the author ends with just sums the whole attitude up perfectly. Sorry, guys, but by unethically attacking Chinese open source, you totally blew it.
You totally blew it. Just simple as that.
It strongly suggests that the strategy has already failed. They have exposed their own deep hypocrisy, they have alienated the developer community, and they haven't actually done anything to stop the rapid progress of open source.
It's basically a classic case of the Streisand effect, right?
Very much so.
By trying to aggressively suppress something, they've just drawn a massive spotlight onto their own vulnerabilities and bad behavior.
I think that's a very fair assessment of the text. And when you combine that public relations disaster with the geopolitical risk of the rare earth minerals, it really looks like a strategic blunder of massive proportions.
So let's just quickly recap this narrative arc, because for you listening, it has been a wild ride. We started with a core accusation: U.S. labs attacking Chinese distillation while simultaneously defending their own aggressive web scraping.
Then we looked at the hypocrisy ledger, the literal billions of dollars in settlements and ongoing lawsuits alleging that the U.S. giants stole books, articles, and personal data to build the very products they are currently trying to protect.
Right. Then we talked about the internal warfare. The Valley poaching top talent just to steal corporate secrets, and those mafia-style silence agreements that keep the peace just barely intact.
And finally, we looked at the massive existential threat, risking a rare earth mineral embargo that Google's own AI predicts is 90% likely to happen, which would effectively shut down the entire hardware supply chain.
All of this chaos driven by the underlying fear that open source is simply going to win, just like Linux won the internet.
It is a very comprehensive takedown of the current Silicon Valley strategy. It peels back the curtain and shows a whole lot of chaos happening backstage.
It certainly is. And it leaves us with a lot to chew on. You know, we so often look at these companies, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, as these invincible monoliths leading us safely into the future. They seem to hold all the winning cards.
But this material suggests the exact opposite. It suggests they are holding a losing hand and just bluffing incredibly aggressively.
Exactly. And that is the final thought I want to leave you with today. If these AI giants are truly this vulnerable to massive copyright lawsuits, vulnerable to having their core secrets stolen by former employees, vulnerable to a supply chain that could literally be cut off tomorrow, are they actually the powerful, stable leaders they claim to be?
It's a great question.
Or is this whole circular firing squad just the desperate thrashing of an industry that is far more fragile than any of us actually realize?
It really raises the question, are we looking at the masters of the universe, or are we just looking at giants with clay feet?
A question definitely worth asking the next time you see a breathless headline about the latest proprietary AI breakthrough.
Absolutely.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive for today. We really hope this gave you a brand new perspective on the drama currently unfolding in Silicon Valley.
Definitely go check out the source material if you want to see all the legal receipts for yourself.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.